لكن في بلاد المحافظة كبلاد الحرمين الشريفين، هذه البلاد المباركة المملكة العربية السعودية، والمحافظة فيها ولله الحمد تعتبر من أكمل صور المحافظة في العالم الإسلامي كله، والمرأة مصونة بحيائها وعفتها وحشمتها، وهي أيضا لا يرى منها شيء، لا من يديها ولا وجهها ولا شيء، كيف تقود السيارة؟ وأنا أقول أن هؤلاء الذين يدعون لقيادة المرأة السيارة حسب يعني تتبع لبعض ما كتب لا يكادون يخرجون عن فريقين. الفريق الأول أناس مستغربون حقيقة يسعون لتغريب.
Marines, General Neller here. These last 18 months, I spent a lot of time talking to you about how we as Marines must treat each other as members of this warfighting organization with dignity and respect. I've spoken about the effort it takes to earn the title Marine, and our families and the nation are proud of who we are and have high expectations of our professionalism and competence. That our Corps does not care where you come from, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're a man or woman, what your sexual preference may be, only that you have the discipline, drive, and commitment to be a U.S. Marine. That when we make the team, we're all teammates, brothers and sisters, Marines. That we are seen by our fellow citizens as men and women of honor and virtue, possessing an unbreakable commitment to each other and to the nation. Unfortunately, it appears that some Marines may have forgotten these fundamental truths and instead have acted selfishly and unprofessionally through their actions on social media. So let me cut to the chase. When I hear allegations of Marines denigrating their fellow Marines, I don't think such behavior is that of true warriors or warfighters. As warriors, we all know that cohesion and trust within a unit and between Marines is vital to success on the battlefield. Right now, we all need to be focused on getting better, becoming more lethal, working day and night to stay ahead of potential adversaries, getting ready for the fight today and the one ahead. Not hiding on social media, participating in, or being aware of actions that are disrespectful and harmful to other Marines. It's embarrassing to our Corps, to our families, and to the nation. Now, the only way we have ever solved any problem our Corps face is to confront it head on.
Plausibly live from the Podcast 99 studios, located in beautiful downtown Manteca, California, this is the Dave Bowman Show. Now, here is your host, the submarine qualified, coffee-swilling, stuffy elitist history buff, Dave Bowman.
Greetings, cheese lovers, and welcome aboard. It's International Day of the Woman, and I am your host, Dave Bowman. Got my coffee ready to rock and roll. You want to join me, 565-DAVE, 565-3283, or Dave at thedavebowmanshow.com. A loqui conitio, stand up, tell those who oppose liberty, don't tread on me. It is, as I mentioned, International Women's Day, which is another in a long list of days designed to make us more aware of something, as if we were not already aware of women. I'm pretty sure I am. And you probably are too, although I'm sure that the intention of the day is, at least as being expressed today, is to bring more attention to perceived problems, perceived social injustices when it comes to women's roles in our society. I'm always fascinated by these things because, again, I live in the greatest country in the world. I know according to the reports that came out yesterday, we're number 7. Huzzah. What a BS study that was. This is the greatest country that's ever existed, ever will exist. There's no place that has the opportunities that this has. And I'm always bemused by these days where I'm told how bad things are here. Terrible. The United States is horrible. Women get paid, pennies on the dollar for what everybody else gets paid, for what men get paid. The opportunities aren't there. And I just think to myself, it's hyperbole for one thing. Is everything perfect? Obviously not, or we wouldn't have a whole lot to talk about today. But this isn't Saudi Arabia, the most conservative Muslim kingdom in the world. It's not Iran and Iraq where women are stoned for having an affair. It's not a place where we tell women you can't do something because you're a woman. Certainly not anymore. There's still a lot of discussion about qualifications and whether or not you can or can't do something. But as we've seen over the last, 30, 40 years, the perception of equality versus the reality of equality are two different things. They really are. The perception of equality is that there isn't any. And yet the reality is many of us at many points in our career have worked for women. We've worked with women. We've worked for women. We've had female supervisors. We've had, many of us are married. You know how those relationships, when they're proper, work out. What's the line from My Big Fat Greek Wedding? The man is the head, but the woman is the neck, right? And she controls things. And this has been the way of things throughout history. In reality, it intrigues me because I watch these reports of how bad things are, and I realize they're not that bad. Are they perfect? No. But they're not perfect for anybody. So why this insistence that if something isn't perfect the way somebody has decided it should be is the ideal, I'm not clear on. And that's why I'm always approaching these days with cautiousness. Normally, I wouldn't have mentioned International Day of the Woman at all. It's not something that's on my radar screen. It's not something that stands up and goes, hey, Dave, you got to talk about this on today. In fact, I think you can go back through 8, almost 9 years on the air and into now our third year of podcasting. I don't think we've ever even mentioned it. I really don't. This is also the first time in my memory that we've had an International Day of the Woman strike. It's supposed to be International Day Without a Woman, which again, every man on the face of the planet has made the joke about, fishing day or whatever. I know this. I've actually been out already 2, 3 times, and in all 3 of those trips out, I've had interactions with females who were in working positions, and they all showed up to work. So I don't know what to tell you about the success of the International Day Without a Woman, except that so far it hasn't affected my day at all, and I don't anticipate that it's going to. I really don't. Primarily because I think most women like to go to work. I mean, they want to go to work. Sure, everybody dreams of not working, but the reality of it is we all have to, pretty much, unless you're, a Vanderberg or Bilderberger or something, then you don't have to. So when it comes to this idea that America is this horrible place for women, I just remind people, look, there are countries in this world where they would literally chop your head off for disrespecting a man. One of the most horrifying videos I've ever seen was of a middle-aged woman in a country where some youths, I wouldn't call them teenagers because they weren't, they were obviously in their 20s, disrespected her. I mean, they were just being rude. They were pushing her around, and she said something to one of them, and they shot her. It's all on videotape. We don't do that here. We don't stone people because they got raped. We don't do those things here. Again, we've got some issues we're going to have to address, and we're going to address some of those today. But this is not, on any shape or form, the worst country in the world for women. It's just not. And anybody that tries to tell me that it is delusional. They really are. Now, having said all that, of course, one of the biggest issues in our country over the last, certainly over the last 10 years has been women in the military, but not just women in the military. There have been women in the military since the 40s, if not before that. During my time in the service, there were women in the military. They took primarily what you would call administrative support roles, medical roles. One of my doctors, while I was in the service, during one of the worst experiences of my life, was a female officer doctor who happened to be submarine qualified. I asked her about it because, it was where I was headed at the time. And it was quite a unique story. She had actually made a patrol aboard a submarine, and while she was there, she took the time to qualify submarines, and you got to respect that. She, as far as I know, at the time, she was the only female who was, and damned if I can remember her name. It's probably in my medical records, which I could find, I would tell you, but it was an amazing little story. There were other women in the service at the time who performed brilliantly, but they were not allowed in combat roles. At the time I was in, they were just debating letting them on combat ships, aircraft carriers specifically, and the idea of putting a woman on a submarine was, I don't want to say laughable, but it was a non-starter. It wasn't going to happen. Of course, now you fast forward a generation, and things are a little different now. Women are on combat ships, and now women are on submarines. Not just any submarine. They started with officers on boomers, but as far as enlisted women go, they're now putting them on submarines. And the first submarine they put them on happened to be mine, the USS Michigan, and that caused some discussion points last year, if you'll recall. To my mind, and I'm going to say this because it's true, to my mind, it is still a bad idea. It is still a very poor idea to put women on submarines. I'm not real enamored with the idea of women on combat ships. In fact, article the other day about the Navy has a pregnancy problem with women getting pregnant on deployment, and of course that creates issues, not just morale issues, but it creates functionality issues. You've got somebody you're depending on to perform a function, to perform a watch, to perform a duty, who all of a sudden is leaving because of this medical condition. I would imagine there's some emotional strain in there as well, because somewhere on that ship, obviously, is a father-to-be who wants to know or may want to be involved or something along those lines. And it can't be an easy scenario. It can't be. In fact, if you go back far enough, folks, this is a plot point from a MASH episode. Remember this? Hawkeye and Hot Lips. Remember for how many years? I don't know. The show was on for 11 years. So for 8 or 9 of those years, Hot Lips and Hawkeye were, banging heads together. They were picking on each other. They were always, and everybody always said, oh, but they really love each other. They really truly care. They just do that because, and then finally in one of the later episodes, they go on a mission together where they're in the combat zone, where they're actually in the combat zone, and they're being shelled and boom, 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 boom. And what happens? There's some emotional stuff going on with her husband, and they end up kissing. And the implication of the episode is that it goes much further than that. But of course it was television, so they didn't show that. But the implication is that's what happened in this combat zone while they're being shelled. Now, most people read that episode, watch that episode, and they go, oh, isn't that sweet? See, they really do care about each other. And that's the closing of the episode. They're referring to each other by these fake names, that are supposed to imply this deeper caring that they have. But we gloss over the reality of it is, which is when they got into a stressful situation, they did what comes naturally. I'm not criticizing it. I'm saying this is what happens. And Hawkeye and Hot Lips, two people who had hitherto been at each other's throats for the better part of the entire Korean War, now all of a sudden are, doing the deed. Under fire, no less. And we seem to just gloss right over that. We seem to miss the implication of that, which is that, when you have people who are attracted to each other in a stressful situation, stuff happens. And it always has, and it always will. It's nothing new, folks. It's nothing unusual. Does that mean that it can't work? Absolutely not. Not what I'm saying. But we have to make allowances for the realities of human beings. We can't set aside the rules of reality for the rules of social nirvana and saying, well, that'll never happen. Because it will. And see, this is what has bothered me the most about this whole, particularly the Navy side of things, putting women on combat ships and specifically on submarines. We put officer women on the USS Wyoming to start with a couple years ago. And sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, what happened? Some smart-ass, second-class petty officer, and I can say that because I was one. I didn't do this, and I wouldn't have done this, but managed to rig up a way to film the female officers in their shower and then distributed it amongst the crew. Again, it's bothered me because it's wrong. It bothers me because it's stupid. It bothers me because I can't believe someone would go to all that effort to do that. I mean, Jesus, have you not seen a naked woman before? And I've been on submarines. I'm telling you, you can find a picture of a naked woman on a submarine. It's not that hard to do. So what was really going on here? Was this really about, well, I want to see that woman naked, or was it about, we'll show them kind of approach? But what bothers me even more is that the Navy had to know that that was going to happen. They knew it was going to happen. It had already happened on surface ships. Hell, it's a scene in a movie called Down Periscope. Again, not quite to that degree, but the idea of putting a woman on a submarine and having her privacy invaded, fully explored in that movie. In a humorous way. We're supposed to laugh. Ha 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 ha. It's funny, see? And so we're supposed to believe that's the way it'll be in real life, and it isn't. And that particular petty officer that did that, I assume, was punished quite severely, as he should have been. Should have been labeled as a sex offender, but I don't know if that's what happened or not. Should definitely have been kicked out of submarines. And now we turn around here, and in the Marine Corps this year, I think it was in January of this year, right? Wasn't that long ago. They started putting women into combat teams in the Marine Corps. Now again, whether I think that's a good idea or a bad idea really isn't the relevant issue. For the record, I think it's a bad idea. I don't think it's going to work. It's going to create stresses. It's going to create problems. But I can give the orders. And I know this as a military person, as a first-class petty officer of the United States Navy. If I'm given a lawful order that doesn't violate the Constitution of the United States or moral compunctions that I may have, it's a lawful order. And I may not like it, but it's my job to carry it out. And I would look at a Marine the same way and assume that a Marine would see things to the degree that they think that way. I would see Marines seeing it even more than that. I've told you this before. I'm not a Marine. I was not in the Marines, but I was assigned to the Marines as part of the Auxiliary Security Force at Fleet Combat Training Center, Dam Neck, the last 3 years I was in. There would be, I don't know, in a platoon, there'd be like, platoon, I don't even know if that's the right word, 8 or 9 of us sailors who were specially trained, weapons qualified, and we would have a Marine Corps corporal or sergeant over us. In our case, it was a sergeant guy by the name of Staff Sergeant Carr, who to this day is one of, I can still see him. He still motivates me 30 years later. I hated him. He was a ball buster, but I recognize the fact that he was doing that to try to keep me as alive as possible. And there came a time when that paid off. But I know how Marines think, and I know how they react to things. And don't get me wrong, I love that about them. I love the fact that they're willing to be that way. To me, when a Marine is told, we're going to have women in the team and you're going to treat them just like you, great. That's all. I'm all for that. And I can see Marines being for that too. But what ended up happening was Marines, somebody, we don't really know who at this point, began taking photographs of female Marines. And those photographs were occasionally, as I understand it, ribald. They were inappropriate. Now, some have argued that some of the pictures of these females, these Marines, were taken by themselves and distributed by themselves. So frickin' what? If my wife takes a picture of herself and sends it to me, and you somehow intercept that, it's not your right to go do anything with that. It's not your place to do anything with that. The picture is not for you, it's for me. And if I do anything with it other than keep it between her and I, then I'm wrong. Somehow or another, these pictures began to be distributed. Now, as I understand it, there was a Google Drive system and a Facebook page called Marines United, where they would place these pictures up there, comment on them, and the comments, even if you just had the pictures and you posted a picture of a beautiful woman, fully dressed, whatever, and said, this is what I like about a Marine uniform. That's uncomfortable. But to go to the points where some of these comments were going, and you can read them for yourself in the links I've provided on the page there at thedavebowmanshow.com today, the comments were not becoming of a Marine. Conduct unbecoming is a serious charge, especially to a Marine. But here we are in this scenario where we've got Marines, both active duty and veteran, and we have people who have access to this, retired Marines, whatever you want to call it, making comments about female Marines who may or may not have even been aware that their pictures were taken. And in some cases, were not aware of this. Now, we sit here on the International Day of Women, and we're having to deal with the Marine Corps. And you heard the Marine Corps Commandant there talking about that at the beginning of the show. And you have to ask yourself, all right, there are countries in this world where they would stone women for getting drunk or having an affair, where they won't let women drive. And we want to think that we're the best, and we are the best, but is this the way the best behaves? Is this what we really do? Is this what we really think of women in our military, that we can just take pictures of them and make comments about them that are the kinds of things that you wouldn't say about your wife, you wouldn't sure as hell wouldn't want somebody saying it about your daughter, your mother, your sister, your aunt, whatever. And unfortunately, this is where we've come. And here's the scary part of this is, okay, the Marines got, the Marine United thing got outed by a former Marine who in turn was threatened, which is absolutely outrageous. That you don't threaten somebody for turning the light on and making the cockroaches scurry. You don't do that. You don't. To this day, I can't believe all the people that had to know what was going on in the Wyoming who didn't say something, who didn't go to their chief or their lieutenant or even the XO or the CO and say, hey, something's happening. You need to know about this. I can't, I don't want to be, the bad guy here, but I can't support this. This is not who we are. It's not what we're supposed to be. And nobody did. And the same with this Marine United thing. But for all of that, this ain't the only one, folks. There's no way in hell this is the only one. This is going on all over the place. It's as predictable as a sunrise. The military had to know it was going to happen when they sent women into these positions. They had to know that this was going to happen. This is not, by the way, this is not Branch Rickey sending Jackie Robinson out onto the field to be called the N-word by Ben Chapman. It's not the same thing. But in some ways, it's worse. In some ways, it's not as bad. In some ways, it's worse. But on the International Day of Women, it's a time for us to sit back, particularly those of us who are military-related, veterans or active duty or have family or support the military, and ask ourselves the question, what happened to us? What happened to our honor? What happened to our code, as the Marines would say? What happened to our ethos? When did we step back? When did we stop being men? When did we stop being sailors, Marines, airmen, soldiers, Coast Guards? When did we stop being what we're supposed to be with that? And why would we accept this? And I realize that the vast majority of us don't. I get that. But somehow or some way, This was allowed to happen, and it went on and on and on before somebody finally said, that's enough. What does it take to get to that point where it says, that's enough? Does it really take an outsider running a website, an investigatory website, to expose this? Where was the Marine of conscience who said, no, you're not doing this in my Marine Corps? We used to say, not in my Navy. We were referring to drugs, but, you were expected to turn in, whatever you want to call it, people who weren't behaving in their Navy-approved manner. And it was considered to be your duty. And now here it is, we're dealing with this International Day of Women, where they want to remind us of the fact that, I guess, women's rights still have a long way to go. That's what we're told. And I can sit here and argue with you that America's the greatest country in the world, that we don't, hang women for mouthing off to men, and we don't, throw lesbian women off of buildings. We don't stone people for having women for having an affair. We let people drive. I can argue all of that. But then you get hit in the face with this Marine United thing, and the creepy, eerie feeling in the back of your mind that this is going on somewhere else. I'm telling you right now, right here, this is going on somewhere else, and somebody knows about it. And if you're that person, you better damn well say something. And if you don't, you're part of the problem. How are we ever going to get past this, I guess, is my question, if we're not willing to really address it and face it head on, as the Marine Commandant said. We're going to have to do that. We're going to have to say to ourselves, this is not acceptable. Now, again, I don't want there to be any misunderstanding. I personally do not believe that women belong in combat roles. I don't believe they belong on submarines. I'm not even comfortable with them on aircraft carriers. I'm really not. It doesn't mean they're not capable of doing the job. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, you can't set aside reality for the fantasy of social utopia. It's not going to work. It never has worked. It won't work now. And you can bring up, well, the Israelis do it, Dave. Yeah, they do, but in a much different way than we do. They do things much differently than we do. And also, we don't know about their statistics of pregnancies, and we don't know what their relationship statuses are, and it's a much smaller country, by the way. You can pretty much walk across it widthwise in some places in a couple of hours. It's a different world. How do we address that? How do we get ourselves back on an ethos, back on a track that says there are differences between men and women. We recognize those differences, and we recognize that we're stronger together, if I can borrow a phrase, than we are without them, without each other. Those are the questions we're going to have to ask, and until we can answer them, we're going to continue to have the misunderstandings that we have that lead to things like the International Day of Women, the International Day Without Women, or whatever it is you want to call it. We got to get this straight, and we got to get this stuff settled, and we got to get this stuff clarified. And somehow or another, we as men have got to get ourselves back on the track of, when we see something inappropriate, we don't encourage it, we stop it. Because if we don't do it, who's going to? And then the shit's going to hit the fan later on, and we're all going to be mad at each other. What do you think? 565-DAVE, 565-3283, telephone. You can leave me a voicemail. You can text me there. Or you can email me, dave@thedavebowmanshow.com, or check us out online at thedavebowmanshow.com and on Facebook and Twitter. Please take the time right now. Tell the people that matter in your life you love them very much. You'd miss them if they weren't there, so don't pass up those opportunities. You don't want to have that regret. I'm Dave Bowman, plausibly live. This is The Dave Bowman Show.
The Dave Bowman Show is a Slippery Fish Entertainment production for the Podcast 99 Network. Copyright 2017. All rights reserved. For more information or to contact the show, log on to www.thedavebowmanshow.com.
Hey, I'm going to go do something productive. I'm going to go watch television.